I work at Shopping24, which is an e-commerce company, part of the Otto Group in Hamburg, Germany. And Shopping24 has several shopping platforms on which you can buy products like interior, clothes, or multimedia. And those platforms basically are search engines for products. So people go there, search for things, and we forward them to the online shops. My name is Katja, and I'm head of quality assurance and SEO. And at Shopping24, I'm the one that advises the teams and that keeps an eye on quality. And in my free time, as Peter mentioned already, I'm loving to do sketch notes, and I present them on my personal blog, katjasays.com. So I'm a big fan of reliable software, and I get really sad when commits go live without being tested sufficiently, if they are tested at all. So this is my sad phase. So before I dive in, I want to make sure that we are on the same page on what we mean with end-to-end tests. I completely focus on our users and their experience. So imagine you want to buy a smartwatch online. You go to your favorite online shop, search for a smartwatch, pick the one you're looking for, put it in the cart, buy it, and you're done. This is your customer journey. End-to-end tests verify that all of this works flawlessly. I want you to keep in mind that the tools that I mentioned during this talk are just those that we at Shopping24 enjoy using and that you might prefer others, but that's actually not the point of this talk. We found a testing process that we feel comfortable with, and that's what I want to show you today. So first of all, let me tell you a little more about the product that we built the testing process for. So this is the functionality of our campaign management software in a nutshell. A user has a list of keywords that he or she wants to process. So they upload it into our software. In this magic box, as you want, the AdWords and Bing ads get generated, the keyword booking jobs get started, and the accounts get structured. Afterwards, the user can optimize the ads if he wants to. So the main task is to handle a great number of processes automatically and to synchronize with the platforms immediately. So today's agenda is, first of all, I want to tell you why we needed a radical change. Then I want to talk about the first attempts and what we optimized about them. And in the end, I want to summarize our experience and learnings for you. So, why has end-to-end testing become so important to us? Well, more and more companies are using our software, which is great. But different companies require different solutions. So the software has been custom tailored for ourselves, so we had to standardize it. We wanted it to be easy to understand and easy to use. Therefore, we wanted to move to a modern state-of-the-art UI, to separate data from templating, and to kickstart writing front-end tests. We chose Vue.js as a framework, and the cool thing is that it already comes with a front-end testing setup, so no configuration, just start writing tests. And in addition, I, as the new full-time QA manager, helped the team to improve the mindset towards testing. Just think about the damage bugs have in different environments. Ideally, your tests prevent bugs from happening at all, but such a perfect world just doesn't exist. So if a bug happens in development, there's not so many impacts, because it's just frustrating for the developers as they have to spend more time to finish the features, but except for the development expenses, there are no additional costs. But if a bug gets into production environment, the consequences can be massive. It's not only frustrating for the developers, but also for the users of your software and for your stakeholders. So in summary, you can say, you, as a developer, not getting things done is still less frustrating than deploying code you can't fully trust. So what is a good strategy to help your product team to embrace front-end testing? Well, the worst thing you can do is to force them to write tests. If you want to create a process that holds up to the test of time, you have to make it feel natural. And when does a process feel natural? Well, first of all, you have to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands the importance of testing and its return on investment. The tests have to be part of the product, and branches without tests or with broken tests are not done and will not be merged. So our vision in a perfect world was testing is easy if we do it right. Tests both save time and save frustration. The team knows that everything works, and the process feels natural. Well, I agree with you, this sounds very ambitious, and even we were skeptical ourselves about this mission, but we thought, just try it and learn from what will happen. So to determine our first steps towards a new and updated process, we took a very close look at where we were. So we did have a definition of done, but it was lacking front-end tests. So the first step was to update this. So now the whole team understands that a feature is not done if it has no front-end testing. These tests actually should be part of your continuous delivery pipeline and run automatically to be sure that nothing breaks. We use Jenkins for that. So our developers often tend to focus on the tasks to get the things done, but they forget about thinking about the big picture. But each task has a purpose which influences the experience of the user. That means we have to look through the eyes of the user as much as possible, because how else can we create user-friendly software? That's why we wanted to try user stories, because we think that's a way to not forget about the purpose of the things we build. We chose Nightwatch.js as a testing framework because we have worked with it already before and because that's the one that comes along with Vue.js. So just a quick summary. What is a user story? Well, it's a short, simple description told from the perspective of a user, and it typically follows a simple template. As a type of user, I want some goal, so that's some reason. And actually, user stories strongly shift the focus from writing about features to discussing them. And these discussions are more important than whatever word you write down. So this is how our first user story looked like. As a user, I want to see job statuses in the dashboard so that I can see when my jobs are finished. In addition, we added an acceptance criteria to make clear when the story is done and when it's sufficiently tested. So it was add all job statuses to the dashboard. As you can imagine, that's not very clear. So the developer didn't know when the issue is sufficiently tested. And what happens? Well, this. The developer thought of every single edge case he could think of and created a very long test scenario like this one here. It has a lot of duplicate code and a lot of noise, which makes it very hard to read, especially for non-technical team members. And also it was very hard to maintain such a long test, and you wasted a lot of time for unnecessary details. Here we see the output of the Nightwatch test runner. And as you can see, if you leave out the exact elements, which I blurred out here, you see a lot of noisy things what the runner does. And nobody really cares for this information. For me, it actually feels like debug output more than actual test output. It might be helpful for the developer during the creation of the task, but afterwards it doesn't serve any value at all because we totally lost the connection to our feature. What we want to see is the result of the test steps, not what the runner does. So although we thought Nightwatch was the right tool for us and we were familiar with it, the team had a problem with the length of the tests and the output of the Nightwatch test runner. To tackle these problems, I was asked for help, and what we needed was a behavior-driven development approach. I introduced the team to Cucumber, which felt really good for them. So before implementing code, you write user stories with test scenarios. Also, you concentrate on the behavior of the users instead of just testing random things. As one of the biggest problems was the absence of a good structure, we shifted from testing big pages to testing smaller scenarios. And with the help of this little abstraction, we made it a lot more easy to read the tests and also to write them, because now you only had to implement small steps instead of huge blocks of code. So the idea is that you start with feature files, which are written in Gherkin and contain the user stories and the scenarios. And the Gherkin syntax enables the team to write plain English sentences that start with the keywords given, when, and then. Note that the feature files do not contain the test implementation. By adding Cucumber to Nightwatch, lots of different programming languages like JavaScript, Ruby, Groovy, or Java were supported, which made it very comfortable for the developers because now they can implement steps in the programming language that they prefer. So here we see the same user story from before, but we enhanced it with several small scenarios. The first one is, given a new job is started or finished, when the user opens the dashboard, then the user should see the status of the job. And this scenario is pretty straightforward because each step is defined in it. And this helps us to reduce the time to write the tests because now the developer doesn't have to think about what to test by themselves, it's just predefined. Also, using the Gherkin syntax in the ticket made it a lot more comfortable for the developer because he could just copy-paste it into the feature file. And ta-da, that's what he did. But as mentioned before, the test implementation is still missing. This is written in separate files, the so-called step definitions. And here you see one implemented test step. At the top, I made it in Java and the button in JavaScript. But it looks very similar in every other programming language. So in the second line, you see the given annotation, which is the connection to our given in the feature file. Also, you see that we pass in a variable. So we have a lot more flexibility and can pass in a value into our feature file if we want to. And the cool step is that we can reuse this step to prevent writing duplicate code. Now the test runner output makes a lot more sense. We see the acceptance criteria from our test scenario, plus we see them in different colors according to their status. So blue means the test hasn't been implemented yet, red means test failed, and green should be clear. So let's have a look at an example scenario from real life so that you can understand the difference between Nightwatch and Nightwatch Cucumber a little bit better. So a user goes to Amazon.com and searches for a smartwatch. Then they click on the first not sponsored result and add it to the cart. When they go to the cart, they want to see the product in the cart. Just a second. So here you can see the code for such an implementation of a test in pure Nightwatch. And as you can see, it's very long, very complex, and it has a lot of nesting in it. So if you would show such a code to somebody who's new to testing, they might be a little frightened by it. The Nightwatch Cucumber code tests the exact same thing, but it's clustered into sections. Those are the steps from the feature files, the given, when, and then, and so on. This makes it much easier to read and also to write the tests. And I think now you can understand a little more of how we can reduce the complexity of writing tests for your developers, especially those who are new to testing. But now let's have a look at the runner's output of the test. Here's the output of the test written in pure Nightwatch. And you see that it's very detailed and contains lots of HTML elements. This is something that's neither relevant for a user nor the product owner or whoever might want to keep an eye on the test result. They do not want to know which element has been present, clicked on, or what text might have been contained. They want to see if the functionality itself works. So in this case, you don't want to see if the H2 element of the card contains the product title of the chosen product, but you want to see if the product is visible in the card. And that's exactly what you get to see with the Nightwatch Cucumber output. You see the steps of the scenarios in normal English sentences, plus you see them in the colors according to their status. So if you compare both outputs on one page, I think you can agree that the Nightwatch Cucumber one is way more pleasant to read and to understand, especially for non-technical team members. The purpose of the tests and its steps can be seen in one glimpse of an eye. So whenever I talk about user stories, I often get the same few questions. A very popular one is, why are user stories useful? Well, we had tickets that were just vague, like the one I showed you before with the vague acceptance criteria. So there was a lot of room for misinterpretation. Developers implemented features and changes the way they thought was correct, but not as expected by the ticket owner. Now with user stories, we could save lots of time and frustration on both sides. Also with user stories, we not only focus on our users, but we try to think like them and to understand in advance how they will use our features. In short, everybody is on the same page, and even somebody who's not part of the product team can see what we are building and why we are building it. Next question. Who writes the user stories? Well, in our case, we like to write them together as a team, which leads to the next question. When do we write them? Well, as we already use Scrum as an agile framework, we simply use the already existing meetings, the sprint planning and the kickoff. In the sprint planning, we prioritize our backlog and choose the tickets for the next sprint. And as we discuss these as a team, we transfer them into user stories right away. Sometimes, not all the conditions are clear for each user story before the sprint starts. So at the kickoff, we apply these amendments to the backlog. Question number 4. Where do we store the user stories? Well, people tend to confuse user stories with tickets, but the main difference is that user stories are part of the software itself. So they are stored in feature files, which also means that they are controlled under version control and live and die with the actual features themselves. Question number 5. Do new tickets have to be written as a user story right away? Well, that's a common misconception. But it's not always possible to write a user story right away. And also it would create too much overhead, as the product team has a look at the sprint backlog anyways before it sprints, so don't create unnecessary work. And the last question is, does it create extra overhead to update user stories and cucumber tests when requirements change? Well, it's normal when requirements for feature change. But as a user story that doesn't contain the implementation details, it often has to be changed only a little and at best even not at all. And the cucumber tests has a very good structure and is easy to maintain thanks to the small steps, so the changes there are often made very quick. So now that we have found a process that works according to our wishes, let's have another look at our vision of a perfect world. And we're happy to see that we were able to make our wishes come true. By shifting from random testing to defining acceptance criteria, we made it a lot easier for ourselves. The developers don't need to figure out what to test by themselves anymore. So this saves us a lot of time and frustration. Now not only the developers, but the whole team can see and understand the end-to-end coverage, so we all know that everything is working in our product. And instead of forcing end-to-end tests, we all together defined it and set it up. And we refined the process all together as a team until we were all happy and comfortable with it. So we together created a process that feels natural. So if you want to set up your own testing process, please consider the following takeaways. As testing should be a part of the product, all the product team members have to be involved, so you have to work together as a team. As transparency is key to reliable planning for yourself and for your team, you have to visualize your progress. Working together means a lot of communication, and nowadays, product teams can consist of members of different roles, so it's crucial to use the same vocabulary to avoid misunderstandings. If you don't have a definition of done yet, please define one together with your team and make it visible for everybody, for example, by hanging up a poster. Also, don't forget to include some testing in it. Eliminate as many pain points as possible. Choose the right framework and write the tests in the programming language that you prefer. And last but not least, keep your testing suite slim. Concentrate on the most important scenarios to keep the runtime as short as possible. So I hope that you find our insights helpful and that I could convince you that it can be fun to write end-to-end tests even with a smile. And the formula to writing end-to-end tests with a smile is the right framework plus clear specs plus short test scenarios equals writing end-to-end tests with a smile. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Katja. And I believe we have quite much time for questions. So let's see the first one. Have you considered using Mocha instead of Cucumber?
Actually, no, because we were just happy with Cucumber, but I might take it away at home and have a look into it. I don't know, Mocha, sorry.
All right, then let's hop to the next one. Isn't it useful to keep the pure Nightwatch output to ensure the repeatability of the test?
Actually, I think that's what the developers do. They have a look at the pure Nightwatch output when they develop the tests, but afterwards, as our stakeholders and the product owner isn't very technical, they show them the other output.
All right, quick answers. Should be all types of tasks written as stories, for example, bugs? Isn't it easier to just write step-by-step scenarios?
Well, it might be easier, but actually, for us, it's important to know why we want to change this. Why is it a bug? Why do we have to fix this? So for us, it's not just do this step, then this step, but it's we want this to be changed because of this reason. So we focus on the user, and that's what we do with all the things. I think, yeah, okay, then maybe there are some tickets you can't really write as a story, but actually we try to write everything as a story, if possible.
At which point of the creation of the user stories is the customer involved?
That's a tricky question, because normally we just use the sprint planning and we are sitting together with our teams, and the team consists of members of different roles, and some of them are like, for example, in customer support, and they know what the user told them. So it depends really on the story. Sometimes it's a ticket that comes in from the customer support who directly spoke to a customer. Sometimes it's just something that we want to create, so it really depends.
And if I revert it a little bit, when should the business be involved?
The business?
Yeah, maybe what I assume is that what the person might have thought of when asking this question instead of customer, but I might be mistaken.
Yeah.
So what happens, so at which point of the creation of the user stories is the business involved?
Yeah, of course the business is involved as well, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Let's go with the next one. User stories are stored in feature files. In what form?
Actually, we have the user story on top, and below that we write down the scenario, so it's a combination of both in the feature files. I hope that this answers the question.
For me, it does. Is everyone in the team involved in user story creation? Is it not a bottleneck?
Well, you might think so, but actually it helps us to save a lot of time afterwards, after the creation of the user stories, because now when we create it all together as a team, then everybody knows what the specs and the requirements are for this ticket. So afterwards we save a lot of time with it. Of course, sometimes the user story is already pre-written because some of our team members already know how to write them, so they can just formulate them for our team, and afterwards we just talk about them, but mostly we create them together.
Okay, there's one more question. Does the feature developer also write the step definitions for the Gherkin test, or do you have separate test devs?
That's also, it depends answer, because if you have somebody who is very technical and can use this kind of abstract way of writing down things, then he writes it directly as a Gherkin syntax. Otherwise, it's the developer or the tester who sits together with the developer who reformulates it as Gherkin.
Thank you very much for all your answers. And please do not forget to use Slido not just for the questions, but also for voting. And thank you very much again, Katja, for your presentation.